Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged world leaders to act immediately, calling climate change the defining issue of our time.
We, as a community of world leaders, are not doing enough. We must listen to the Earth's best scientists. We must see what is happening before our eyes. And we need greater ambition and a greater sense of urgency.
Scientists say the world's average temperature is expected to rise by 3 degrees Celsius this century. Widespread changes to weather patterns and increasing heat is already here, and it's hitting the world's poorest and most vulnerable people first. That is why the UN made climate action one of the Sustainable Development Goals, the world body's guidelines for political and economic strategy through 2030. Still, there are major obstacles ahead. The U.S. announced its withdrawal, of course, from the Paris climate deal last year, and developed countries have been slow to mobilize a $100 million fund to help pay for the fight against climate change. Well, my colleague Sean Callebs spoke to Patricia Espinosa. She is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. They started by discussing what can be done to protect endangered areas.
Some countries are taking special measures in order to really protect those areas. If you look at the figure of how much the protected areas have been growing in different parts of the world, I would say this is a very, very important measure. On the other hand, also going towards the environmental services, really giving a value to the preservation of those areas is part of the policies that some countries are putting in place. But at the end, what we really need is that countries put together very integrated, comprehensive programs that put in the center of their national planning and budgeting the issue of climate change.
What are some of the critical issues as you see them? Because we hear about climate refugees, and in fact I did a story on that, a group of Native Americans who live in South Louisiana, but we're seeing more and more of that. To what degree are you worried about this?
I mean, at the end, climate change, if we don't address it, will have a very broad spread destabilizing effect in the world. This is, it's not only about survival for some, because, you know, now people tend to think, well, it's about some of the small islands and that can be managed. No, it's really about destabilization, economic, social, and political destabilization. Yes, I worry about it. I worry also because I think that in the minds of many politicians, this is not yet an issue that they see as one of the central issues that they should address.
If you think back to Copenhagen, 2008, China was arguably the stumbling block that kept climate from being addressed on a global scale back then. Fast forward to Paris in 2015, President Xi, his government, really some of the leaders pushing it through. There have been claims that China wants to be the international leader in climate change. China denies that, but what do you think about China's push toward a cleaner environment, cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner soil?
Well, I think China has recognized, the Chinese government at the highest level has recognized that this is something that is in their own interest, that there is no way that anybody could say this is not necessary. They were literally really suffocating in so many cities. So they have recognized that now, and like many other things that China does, when there is a decision, then everything moves in that direction. So I think this is a very welcome development. And yes, China has become one of the most important providers of clean technologies.
World leader.
Yeah. And China is today has the biggest solar energy installations in the world. And they are really doing an amazing transformation.
In the address a couple of weeks ago, again by the UN Secretary General, he talked about the one thing he thought the world needed right now to fight climate change was world leadership. What do you think the #1 goal is in making progress toward fighting this?
Well, it's a process of such a deep transformation that you require lots of things at the same time to be happening, right? We need leadership in policy making. We need leadership also in promoting international collaboration, because nobody alone will be able to do it. It requires leadership in building the partnerships. That's the other point. And unlike other international agreements, multilateral agreements, in this case, it is so clear that governments alone cannot deliver on the commitments that they have made. So building those partnerships, working with society, and this is why I think that I fully agree with the Secretary General. He's right. We need leadership. Leadership at home, leadership in business, leadership in social, in civil society, leadership really everywhere.
And lifestyle changes. I mean,
absolutely.
That's going to be necessary.
Yes. Yes, and there is also a question of leadership at home. This is what I mean when I say at home, you know. So you say, okay, if I'm the mother, I will not feed my children meat more than once a week, for instance. No. I will try to use organic products. I will tell them that they cannot just be taken by car everywhere. They need to use public transportation. So there's many things to do.